it's Drybear. And yesterday we were fortunate enough to get an official interview with the two directors of the First Descendant. Now, this interview is in Korean. It was done by a Korean media website. So keep in mind, just disclaimer here, this is their words spoken in Korean and then translated using Google Translate to English. So I'm going to do my best to interpret it. Just to be sure, I'll put it on screen as well so you can see, but they're talking a little bit about the future of TFD, some of the new major updates and episodes coming to Season 3, swords, maybe some of the Ultimate Luna mods and things like that. So we're going to dive into that and kind of see what we're hearing from them. So the reporter starts with a softball, as they often do, asking, hey, how are you doing? And Lee Byung-jun responds, this is the update we've been preparing for the longest since we launched live. This was definitely their biggest update to date with Season 3, the new zone and everything, and it got delayed as well, which was a huge stressing point for them, I'm sure. So they say, we've been busy communicating, updating, testing, and providing feedback for the past few weeks. We're currently discussing how we should use this as a springboard to plan how we should run future updates. I'm curious what they think about like the demo that they did. A demo for a live service update for a live service game is not all that common. So I'm curious if that was something that they would continue doing in the future or something they're interested in doing, and also just how this informs them. I think the biggest takeaway that they should get from this major update for Season 3, at least from my perspective, is that their update speed is too slow. That's kind of the biggest takeaway, is that it's not, obviously people have their own opinions on whether they like the season updates, whether the content is good or not, or is meant for them or not. But in general, I would say that the biggest takeaway is that the time between updates is too long. And I think the more that they can do to try and minimize that time gap, accelerating the rate of content hopefully without losing any quality, would be a big boon to the game, because whether you like Sigma Sector or you like Void Vessel or you like Axion Planes, it wouldn't really matter that much if you weren't stuck with it for 4 to 6 months at a time without any new major things coming into the game. Lee continues to say, I'm giving a lot of thought to how we'll lead from a long-term perspective. While the past year has been a frantic one with a focus on responding quickly to feedback, going forward we're committed to providing stable operations, which is kind of interesting, because I would say Season 3 is probably the most unstable release they've had so far. But obviously, Lee is a lot more focused on the production side of things, so this would be his primary focus. The reporter then asks, there were many twists and turns, but the Season 3 update has finally been completed. You actually prepared for Seasons 0 and 1 before they went live, and you probably had some planning in place for Season 2 as well. However, Season 3 is a true first, so there must have been a lot of trial and error. What did you want to show, and what did you feel was lacking? A very good question. This time, Ju Min-suk responded with this one. While preparing for the season, the things I most wanted to showcase were large-scale annihilation battles and giant monster battles. Over the past year, we focused on instance dungeons, so we've often had brief encounters where players barely had time to communicate with each other, only to then part ways. So this time, I wanted to create a field-centric experience where players gather to battle and then go on other missions together. This one, I think they still have a long way to go on personally, if I were just to comment on his response there, mainly because I feel like the missions in Axion Planes are so spread out, and we're only limited to 4 players in the area. I really do think that if they want to continue doing zones like Axion Planes, they really need to actually be working on a phasing system, an instancing system, or a way to load people in and out. Now, obviously, even better would be if they could raise the limit of number of players in a zone to like 8 or 12 or 16. Like, imagine if 16 players could fit into Axion Planes, you would pretty much have a good chance that people would spread out and start doing more missions. You'd run into a lot of people, and it would be a lot more alive. However, realistically, if you had 16 Inezes doing one mission all at once, it would probably become, untenable for any major machine unless it was top end to be able to run it. So they have performance issues there. Now, to solve those performance issues, many large-scale multiplayer games do instancing, channeling, or phasing, and I think that some kind of, or even just like true server meshing, which may or may not be worth the time and effort for them. But to be able to do something like that, I think would go a long way in helping Axion Plays feel like what he's saying here, right? He wanted, people, they only had time to communicate and they part ways. I wanted to create a field-centric experience where players gather to battle and then go on other missions together. And I think with the size of Axion Planes, with the amount of missions that are there, only having 4 people there, I don't think meets those goals. And hopefully they can work more towards that in the future with more updates. Ju goes on to say another change is the battle mechanics. We focus on presenting a more rational, enjoyable, and challenging combat experience than the one-tick battles that usually end in one go. This became the foundation upon which Axion was built, and I would say that they definitely hit that mark. Now, it doesn't mean that the most built characters aren't still blowing through Axion Plains, but I would say Axion Plains compared to the rest of the game definitely feels a lot more demanding. The monsters have more HP, they have more damage reduction, there's more mechanics like the adaptive defense, and for the most part, you really do need to bring a fully built character that's ready to go into Axion Plains, and even then, you will notice that you have to put a little bit more effort into killing the mobs that are there. So in general, you know, like, you're not killing mobs as soon as they spawn as much in Axion Plains, though there are still builds that do that in this zone. He goes on to say, I've always wanted to make giants appear in the field, and in fact, you could encounter them in the field before launch. If you watched the pre-launch trailers for the First Descendant, a lot of the footage was you fighting them in the field. You actually fought, like, you know, like Dead Bride out in the field or Swamp Walker out in the field. They probably ended up pulling back on that because of performance in general, or just didn't feel right. But they said, you know, he's talking about how they've always wanted to do that again. However, when I tried catching them in the field at the same time, it became too much of a damage-hungry meta. This is because you meet random players in the field, so you can't strategize. Or what he means is that you might find people that are underbuilt. So I created a separate interception battle to allow for more strategic battles. This Axion is an attempt to bring this back to the field. So there's twofold on this. Obviously, Wallcrasher is 8-player instead of 4-player. It is very much dominated by Serena's right now. Serena is kind of simplifying the Wallcrasher fight to an extreme degree. It really just comes down to how many Serenas do you have to fight it. But I definitely see what they were going for with this one. However, there are 2 Colossus that spawn in Axion Plains when Wallcrasher announces his warning 10 minutes before, and you can go fight them. They are pretty tanky, and you have to have a very good build to solo them within time, because they have a time limit on them. But if you have 2 people there, you can very easily blow through them. They do give good rewards, and it is part of it. So you like, I think right now Dead Bride and a Grave Walker show up in the Axion Plains, so that is pretty cool. The reporter then says, as you mentioned, the field hunts themselves were quite fun. Each mission took about 3 or 4 minutes, and there was a certain satisfaction in slaughtering enemies. However, they were too large. The current Axion feels like they've simply expanded the existing fields. For example, they've expanded the White Knight field, which had several missions, added a giant, and occasionally provided supplies through events. It almost feels like they made the field so large to showcase the mounts. Is there a specific reason for creating such a large field? So, great question. Why is Axion Plains so big? And if I could interject my own question, like if I was Axion, if I was asking this question, there's a question of, you know, if Axion Plains is the shape of a mustache on our world map, why is Axion Plains a giant square on the actual map? I feel like this breaks my immersion and my day is ruined. So Minsuk responds, first, to fill the battlefield and events, we needed a space that wouldn't interfere with each other. We needed some space to accommodate the 7 missions, the vehicle-based missions, the field Colossus, Void Axiom, and the new content coming soon. So we created a field with some margin, and we plan to fill it in as we progress through Season 3. The big thing here is he's talking about level of detail and render distance. So if you make the field so big that most of the time people doing other missions are outside of your draw distance, it's going to improve performance a good bit, because it means that they're not being loaded into memory at that time, right? So it kind of creates this situation where, because everyone's so far apart in Axion, it can help improve performance in general, because, you know, if you have 2 missions right next to each other, then you're loading in dropships, you're loading in players, you're loading in VFX, SFX, content packages. All of that is being loaded in and used in active memory, which causes a big performance hit, right? So that's probably why they ended up making the field so big, and we'll have to see as they add more stuff to the field, does that problem get exacerbated or not? But it is cool to see that they plan to add more content to Axion over time. They are kind of planning for, you know, adding more and more details to the game to make it more fleshed out. So we might see more missions, more Colossus battles, more meteors falling, more race options or race tracks that you can use as part of it as well. They also mentioned they want to add more mutant cells to the game. Currently, there are no mutant cells that affect weapons in general, so having more of those could be cool. So there's definitely more going on there. And the reporter follows up by saying, you mentioned that Void Vessel is also releasing new missions, right? So we can think of Axion as filling up the map. Come to think of it, the field used to be so narrow that while you were doing a mission, the fusion reactor boss would come up and wipe you out. If you're going to add new content, it'll have to be wider. So you're just talking about how, like, before you were getting like Kingston you were getting like Swamp Walker in a corner of Kingston, which he didn't really fit in. Whereas now with Axion Plains being a dried out ocean bed, it's way wide open, so there's plenty of room for activities. Then the reporter asks a spicy question, a very important one. The patch came later than expected, right? The big delay, right? We had like a major delay on the patch, which already had been kind of late to begin with. So there's just this big question from the reporter of why was it delayed and was it worth it? And production director takes over here. Lee, the schedule was delayed by adding demos, adding intermittent previews, and handling live events. So it ended up being about a month later than original. I actually hate this answer. I'm not trying to throw any shade on Lee. I think Lee does a great job, but this answer is actually so painful. And this could be mistranslated. This could be something, but the schedule was delayed by adding demos, previews, and live events. That feels like a really rough answer, right? Because it sounds like, because they did the PAX thing with the cosplayers, they did some really, big giveaway bonuses with physical items. They did the demo thing. They did some media previews. They had a media tour. So like they were trying to hype up the release of the game. And his answer here, at least in the translated version, makes it seem like the delay was mostly because they wanted to have time to promote the patch, not because the patch actually needed to be, worked on for more stability and things like that. So that's kind of an odd answer. Maybe that's weirdly translated, but there's that as well. We originally wanted to update the game for the first anniversary. I think this is the crucial difference between new development and live service. During new development, these variables were more or less controlled, but during live service, you have to deal with the immediate fires, which is true. The reporter then kind of doubles down on this, which is good on them for doing this. Season 3 was planned during the live service, so it feels like it took longer than expected. So he's saying that they had worked on the game, and when the game was ready to ship, they started working on Season 0 and Season 1 before the game even launched. So they had already started on Season 0 and Season 1, and then even before Season 1 launched, they had already started on Season 2. So what he's getting at here is that because, they already had their launch plan going for the game, they started already working on the new content before, their deadlines and tentpoles had lined up and actually landed. So his question here is, this was the first one where they had to start the development as part of it, more of like a hot drop of this, of them working on it in live, so it was a little bit different. This time, you added a demo build and conducted the focus group testing to gather feedback. Do you plan to continue developing Season 4 in this way, aiming for perfection? And Lee responds, I think there are many ways to improve the quality of the game. For example, operating a test server, as many Korean games do, could be one solution. Focus group testing, which is being conducted in Korea and the US, isn't easy. How can we collect feedback and mitigate issues during updates? We're actively looking at balance issues, usability, and other aspects through previews. Vehicles were one such example, and we're considering how to effectively collect this feedback. The reporter then says, now that we've heard about the update process, let's ask about the content. This is probably why you're here watching the video. First, the story. Personally, I'm the type to get so engrossed in Eugene's story that I'd cry, but this time, by Eugene, he means Eugen. Google Translate has trouble with a few of the Descendants. But this time, Carell's story was truly amazing. I was impressed by Dahi last season, the new executives this season, and Carell's costume choices. This time, like General Zod in Man of Steel, he has a story that feels justified for his people. So, yeah. On the other hand, Enzo, a key figure on the human side, feels like a complete idiot. I don't know why my man Enzo is catching strays here from the reporter. A complete idiot. Glay finally says she understands, but I think he needs some refinement. I like to see the talented supply officer who's full of nerd-like qualities in a nutshell. The story will continue in October, and I'm curious to see how it unfolds. This time around, Ju Min-suk takes the answer here. The most important part of the story was starting Carell's narrative. Him and his home planet interaction with the Void and giving him a little backstory without giving too many details on that. The positive perception was the most important goal, and as the story progressed, we tried to incorporate the elements that gamers love, the drama of the ancestors and the descendants. That's why Season 2 was a story focused on the drama, and this time we tried to incorporate the drama of the Descendants while developing the narrative. We felt like we tried to pack too much into too short a time frame. That's why Enzo's portrayal was so disappointing. So I'm determined to give Enzo a chance to redeem himself. There are many people who like him, laughs. To which the reporter responds, hey, that's me. I like Enzo. I'm that person that likes Enzo. It's me. So Ju responds, the next story is a full-fledged culmination of Carell and the Descendants' final battle. To achieve this, we need Corell's narrative, the Descendants crisis, and the Command Center's crisis in Albion. We've already begun laying the groundwork for this. We're aiming to create an atmosphere that's escalating. So their goal now with Season 3 is to escalate the primary story of the game relating to Corell and the Iron Hearts and the Descendants and that sort of thing. So I guess, you know, with the next few updates of story, we should expect, you know, Albion to be in trouble, the world to be threatened, the Descendants to be in crisis, and Corell's narrative to be fleshed out. So look forward to that in the coming updates. And the reporter says, no, is this already the final match with Corell? To which Minsook responds, I didn't say when it would end. If you want to play the final game, you have to start, right? Reporter then says, I also wondered if I made Corell's story too compelling. The justification for the race is like General Zod, and the revenge is like Baron Zemo, who caused the Sokovia crisis. I think you've combined them very well. I'm curious what you focused on most when crafting Corell's story. The director responds, when designing the enemy Corell, I hoped gamers would connect with him. Oh my God, how many people, raise your hand if you've connected with Corell? He's an enemy, but he deserves it. Previously, this reliability was limited to background descriptions, but I wanted to bring it into the story so more gamers could relate to him. That's how I wanted to establish the enemy and powerfully drive Corell's story forward. So he's kind of going for that, you know, that Thanos direction of like, you know, is he, you know, he's evil, but he's kind of right though, you know, like that kind of dichotomy. And the reporter says, I feel like Corell is becoming too complete. Both the Vulgus got translated into Burgess. The Vulgus Descendant costume he wore for Daya, so the whole Daya storyline last season, and the new executive costume he's wearing this time around have really resonated with me. He even has a strong presence and a strong cause. After the Corell match, he'll need another enemy, but I wonder if he can handle it. So the reporter just loves Corell and the Man of Steel vibes. And both directors respond, I'm glad you gave us such a positive review, and I think our intentions were conveyed well. And Lee says, as you said, I'm also worried about what to do with the next enemy after Corell. The reporter then says, as you mentioned, Albion was suddenly kidnapped, putting them in a precarious situation. It's a bit contrived, but let's let it slide for the sake of the story. Alpha, who lost his powers, is captured, and Nell, who returned, has become a Descendant. Nell was popular, so she deserved to be a Descendant, but Harris, who also returned, suddenly declared herself to the Descendant during the last broadcast. So as I watched the story, I thought, so like they're asking, why is Harris the next Descendant? So both directors respond, I got a lot of criticism since the last broadcast was a first anniversary event. Thought maybe I overdid it because of my greed. He's talking about all the previews and announcements. And then Lee says, I said I wanted to show everything I could, so I revealed everything I could, and eventually the next Descendant was revealed. So they're just saying that, hey, whoops, it's Harris, whatever, deal with it. So the reporter confirms that Daya, you know, Glay's daughter, will be appearing too. It has already been confirmed that next year Daya will become a Descendant. So they kind of already talked about that. It won't be this year. We have Ultimate Eugen, Ultimate Luna, and then we have Captain Harris as the next 3, 2 Ultimates and 1 more Descendant through the rest of the year. And they said Daya will be coming next year at some time, which is confirmed here by Ju Minsuk, who says it's already confirmed that Daya will be released. And then the report, this is just going to be an endless cycle. So basically everyone loved Nell, myself included, as a character and kept asking for her to be a Descendant. So they made Nell into a Descendant, which I would say went over pretty well. It fit the story. It went well. I think that Nell has one of the coolest base Descendant designs in the game, so all is really good. And so they needed a new intelligence officer that they could add to the game that could do the intelligence officer role, since Nell is now in the field doing Descendant things. So they added Amelia, the new intelligence officer, the operator for the Descendant, and now everyone's fallen in love with Amelia and has been asking for her to be a Descendant. So the reporter's like, well, okay, so if Nell became a Descendant, why not Amelia? And we're just going to be in an endless cycle on this one. Especially with like Dominique showing up a little bit more in the story. I think a lot of people are asking for her. There are people are asking for, you know, other characters like Reina in Albion and that sort of thing. But both directors agree that I think Amelia has her own fan base. I definitely thought it existed. So they're just acknowledging that people like Amelia. And I think that also, like, bone structure wise, Amelia has a little bit different face, like a little bit more Eastern style face, just like bone structure wise and just the way the skin falls. So I think it was kind of a little bit different for them. Then the reporter moves on to say, next is a part of the story that brought a lot of laughter. Our food maker, our chef, Blair, is teasing his friend again. This time he calls Jayber pseudo. Was that intentional? And G responds, honestly, it was a bit too much from Blair. I'm sure Jayber was upset too. And the reporter says, since it was Blair, the atmosphere was understandable. He was the one awakened to his successor after the restaurant burned down. Anyway, you're saying it wasn't a typo, but intentional? And the reporter says, let's take a look at the core content, back on track from, the banter that they had. This Axion's gimmicks can be broadly divided into attribute adaptation and heavy armor objects, which is pretty true. The weapons that counter these are the Eraser and the Annihilator, or Exterminator, but they're more cumbersome than the Voltia in terms of gimmick countermeasures and less versatile than the Malevolent. That is very true. This reporter is kicking a lot of butt right now. While builds are still being created, the Eraser is weak and the Exterminator's multi-targeting system is slower than expected. Aren't they overly focused on being OP? She responds, I can't say we weren't conscious of overpowered, because overpowered has been a risky factor several times in the past. The development team and I have been cautious. Serena, a firearms dealer, is currently at the peak of her popularity, so we're worried that if we break the weapon peak, Serena's popularity will rise again. So we proceeded cautiously for now, but we need to quickly patch any shortcomings to enhance the content's appeal. So they're saying that they're aware of Serena, they're aware of gun Descendants, they're aware of the weapon cores, and they were consciously trying to make sure that both Eraser and Exterminator didn't, brick the game with how overpowered they were. So if you feel like Eraser is a little weak, which it does feel like it's pretty weak, Exterminator is good for what it's for, but outside of that, it's not super powerful compared to like Restored Relic, for example, but it is an interesting concept. You mentioned trigger modules in your inquiry, and it's a similar case. The trigger modules are a key feature of this season and require a lot of farming, so we're preparing quickly to patch any areas that feel ineffective or lacking. And the reporter asks, have you guys found any trigger module combinations that you use internally? And Ju Min-suk says, I've been constantly monitoring gamers' gameplay, and I think most of them have figured it out. Now gamers can tell just by looking at it. The trigger modules are universal. They work for some Descendants, but not so well for others. Our current plan is to add trigger modules for Descendants who haven't fully benefited from them, with updates next month and the following month. I would say that for the most part, each Descendant has like 1 or 2 trigger modules that they can utilize, sometimes 3 if they can use one of the like universal ones like Power Beyond or like the battering ram one. But in general, most Descendants only have 1 or 2 choices to make on which trigger module they can use, just because there's only 8 of them and most of them require a specific tag on an ability. There's only like 2 or 3 of them that are global that can be used by anyone, and that's even if you can make use of the effect that it grants in that case as well. So he's saying that people have figured it out, but obviously I think that the game would be better served if there were a lot more trigger modules if they're going to be so highly specialized. And props to the reporter, another great question here. I have a personal question. The Power Beyond, so ignore the Google Translate here, he's talking about Power Beyond. So Power Beyond is a trigger module that has for sustained long-range dealers, but the 15% skill boost applies unconditionally. Like as long as you have Power Beyond equipped, you get the 15% increase, which is an increase to your base skill power boost ratio, just applied flat as long as you have it equipped, regardless of sustained skill. To what extent was this trigger module option intentional? So he's asking like, hey, most of the trigger modules are conditional. Most of them require a stat. However, one of them, Power Beyond, just unconditionally applies its buff permanently with no activation requirements. Is that something that they intended to do? Min-suk responds, yes, that's right. If you don't have any immediate use for Power Beyond, you can use it to draw on the other side's power from beyond. The reporter asks, since we mentioned Serena earlier, I can't help but mention Wall Crasher. Many gamers predicted Serena's dominance before the update, absolutely. And as expected, she's been doing well. In fact, most people count how many Serenas they have in their Wall Crasher, and that is an easy predictor of how fast the Wall Crasher is going to die. Honestly, I like Serena, but rather than nerf her, I think it would be better to focus on her Wall Crasher patterns. Serena has an advantage because there are so many ground patterns, right? Will the next Field Titan reflect this? Ju Min-suk then responds, first, Serena's gun damage is overwhelming. The other Descendants need to catch up. Then, I think gamers will be convinced once a Titan counters Serena. If that doesn't happen and a Titan just counters Serena, they'll be left wondering, what am I supposed to do? And he's right about this. What he's saying is basically, if they nerf Serena without making any other changes, it's going to destabilize the game, because right now people are consistently getting their Wall Crasher loot on cooldown every hour because Serena exists, right? Even if you go with a fully built Serena with a fully built weapon and everything perfect, even if every other person just stays on the outside and does nothing, you can still solo the Wall Crasher in like 16 minutes or something like that. So the fact that Serena is so outrageously really overpowered. It means that you can be consistently farming the loot that you need regardless of what your teammates are doing. And he's right that if you just nerf Serena in a vacuum and do nothing else along with that, it's just going to make Wall Crasher harder to complete and become more of a pain point for the players. Which he's saying they'll be left wondering, what am I supposed to do? So my priority is to strike a balance, specifically buffing the Descendants to match Serena's performance and ensuring that everyone can enjoy the event regardless of what Descendant takes on the field Titan. So they're saying that their goal right now is not to touch Serena, it's to buff up the other Descendants and try to introduce new mechanics in the future updates that make Serena a little bit less viable. Then the reporter asks, you had a hard time during the Inez incident, which we call it on this channel, the Inez incident, when Inez got nerfed and everyone freaked out instead of review bombing the game. And Ju Min-suk says, yes, such a sad story, ... and then laughs, probably nervously. The reporter says, we're still looking at skill damage. Nell could probably reach Serena's level right now. Even my Nell takes about 40 seconds to do Stormhanger. So this reporter obviously games. Isn't it time for Inez to return? Since the coefficients are in place, how about just breaking through the wall? Can we not ask for Inez buffs, please? And it continues, let's continue with the Descendant story. When Nell was first introduced, I thought she'd be a gun dealer because her weak attack buff. But when I played her on the test server, I found that her skill dealer potential was actually higher. So I'm having fun with her, but something feels off, should I say? I've used up all my stacks for skill 1, then it's time for skill 1. I'm a pad, so it's X, then he's on console, so he's just X and X and X, but it feels, Ju Min-suk says it feels empty, and the reporter says, yes, it's empty. It's about 0.3 to 4 seconds of just waiting. Even with a cooldown of 0.9, there's still a delay. Was this intentional? And Min-suk says, yes, it's probably because she's a character with such high directional strength. However, the controls don't just require one button repetitive taps, right? We balance her so that she requires the ability to adapt her skills to the situation. So they're saying the way that she feels right now, spamming a sieve, changing directions, aiming projectiles is all intentional. Twister Reporter says, I think it would be good if you could ease things up a bit. I'm busy laying on the floor, using the Ash and using skills. So what he's saying is here, he plays on console, he plays on a controller, and he's just kind of overwhelmed with the amount of button presses and finger gymnastics you have to do to play Inez regularly. If you're someone who plays on console, comment below on your experience with Nell using those buttons. I think I said Nell. So you're using Nell for that. Personally, I think it's fine. I like the higher APM playstyle of Nell. It's different from the rest of the Descendants. I don't think they should try to homogenize her at all. But again, I play on mouse and keyboard. I don't play the First Descendant with a controller. So let me know how it feels using your thumbs and your fingers for bumpers and things like that, and pressing in analog sticks for using a sieve, how that feels. That might actually be too cumbersome. Min-suk replies that it actually, during the focus group testing, it required a higher APM than it does right now. They actually brought it down. So he's saying that they received feedback and added the contagion feature, but we had to keep using it during focus group testing. We're constantly listening to feedback on usability issues. As controller users say, you'll accidentally ride a vehicle while using Nello Assy. So I think what they're saying here is that sometimes you accidentally get on the hover bike, or sometimes you accidentally do other things while you're trying to a sieve scan with the controller pressing in the analog stick. And the reporter says, I'm looking forward to smoother controls, and asks about Nell support. So there are 2 red mods for Nell right now. One of them turns her ultimate, which is a buff, into an attack skill, a skill attack skill. And then her other one turns her 2 and her 3 into buff skills. So you'll have a buff option for Nell. So Nell as a support function. And when you first introduced Wall Crasher, you mentioned wanting supports to be utilized. Of course, Eugen and Enzo aren't used as much, but so far they feel ineffective. I'm not sure why you gave Ajax 20 points, but the same goes for the barrier. Shouldn't there be trigger modules or buffs for supporters? That would also raise the issue of supporters being essential. I'm curious about the direction. This question has been asked relentlessly since the game came out. We want more tanks, we want more supports, we want more that sort of thing. So what does the director say? He says the response that they've been saying for several months now: we don't intend to create content that requires a support. As much as people want there to be tanks and supports, they have said several times over the last few months that they don't want to do it. And honestly, the way TFD is right now, you could make it that way and it would be really fun, but I think there's very much a a carry moocher mentality in TFD right now, where people just want to get the loot they're after. Like, they want an easy path to get their loot. And when you make content that's too hard or requires a specific team comp, it makes it harder to solo or carry others in. And it seems like they're just kind of accepting that that's their fate in a looter shooter, that they're not going to try and create content that requires a specific team comp. Right now, I would say you definitely don't need Serena for Wall Crasher, but you probably want as many Serenas as you can get just to make it reasonable. So he says, we don't tend to create content that requires support. We don't think it fits our game. As I mentioned during the balance issue, we wanted Wall Crasher to be content that any Descendant could enjoy in their own way. However, Serena's firepower is so strong right now that no matter what we do, it's impossible to match that. At least they're aware of it. Ajax is supposed to be able to support other characters with a barrier and deal damage, so they'll be able to handle it. We need to bridge this gap first so that supporters feel like they've been helped when they support. That's why balancing is the most urgent matter, and once we do that, everything else will be resolved. They mentioned many times that they wanted Ajax to protect you from falling rocks, and Eugen to heal you, and Enzo to buff you, but ultimately it's just a bunch of flying mosquitoes named Serena that are going around destroying the Wall Crasher in 50 seconds. And the reporter asks, like, is it the builds that we're looking at here? Because he mentions that there is a damage reflect build for Ajax, where if enemies attack your barrier, you can reflect damage back, and you can actually do some respectable damage with this reflection. So he's asking, does that mean that you need the ability to deal damage to a single target to be a viable Descendant, rather than just, you know, AoE or support skills? And Juminsuk says, yes, Ajax needs to go up too. Ajax also deals damage with jumps and shouts, right? Question mark, shouldn't he know? I think a dealer needs to have their own unique utility. Honestly, I like sturdy characters like Ajax, so I've tried all sorts of things. The reporter says, I actually like Enzo, so I tried playing Wall Crasher with him, and he was just like Serena. Speaking of balance, you can't leave out Jayber. Our Shudo-kun finally became human. It seems like he could play everything on his own except for the deep space. You discarded 2 modules on Jayber, so the 2 of his red modules got deprecated and removed, and kept only the other 2. That must have been quite the decision. I'm curious about what you considered, which is a great question. The director says, we gave a lot of thought to the part you mentioned. Still, we feel we needed to be bold, so we went ahead with it. Which I like this line of thinking from the director here, mainly because they have buffed Jayber, buffed and reworked Jayber like 6 or 7 times, and every single time it was a marginal increase that made no real difference in him being viable. And so with the 7th rework, they had to be a little bit bolder and more brazen with him, because the other attempts had failed miserably. So I kind of agree with the thought process here that, hey, if we try to rework a character 6 times and he still sucks, maybe we need to look at some more drastic changes to try to get him in line with the others. And it seems like this one worked, as Jayber is one of the top 4 Descendants for clearing Stormhanger. He still has some good clears for other places as well, which is quite good. So he says, Jayber, a character with potential in localized combat, was limited by awkward controls and low damage output. We believe that if we could address this, he could thrive, especially in Axiom, where movement isn't a priority. Fortunately, many players have expressed interest in Jayber's changes, leading to increased research on his build, which is very encouraging for us. They're saying that, hey, it worked, and they're pretty happy with the results. Then he says, for the monthly balance, next month is going to be Lepic. So there you go, confirmed from the director. Lepic will be the next Descendant getting a major buff in the next update, so September, I guess. And then he said that the month after that, they're going to be doing Kyle as a major buff. So if you are a Lepic fan, or Repic, as Google Translate tries to tell us, so Lepic next month, and then Kyle the month after that. So some new buffs coming from them, and they both definitely need it, because realistically, Lepic has, used to have the best bossing build in the game once upon a time for Frostwalker, and then just fell off the planet and really just got used for his toe vortex effect in Void Erosion for a little while, but really just has not been the bosser that he once was. So hopefully they can do the same thing with Lepic and Kyle as well. Which if you go in game and check out Repic, he has no records on solo Abyss, even on the normal difficulty. So no ultimate Repics have cleared him or cleared the new Abyss boss yet. So if I could find, if I'm not blind, yeah, no, not a normal Repic either. And then if we go over to Kyle, Kyle actually has some decent clears. He's actually getting some 2-minute clears and 3-minute clears on Stormhanger. Certainly not the highest, but definitely within reasonable territory. So those 2 characters targeting for buffs the next month, September, and then the month after that for October. The reporter says, since we're on the subject of Kyle, I should probably talk about just Kyle's playstyle. Would it be possible to do like a bombing mode for Kyle? And I think they're referring to the one shot that we had on Gluttony, where Kyle could build up a whole bunch of stacks with a machine gun and then, you know, charge up a supercharged kaboom charge and slam into Gluttony and one-shot him, doing billions of damage. That was a bug that they fixed, and then since then Kyle fell off a little bit, though he does have some good clears on Stormhanger and still is doing pretty decent. He's saying like, hey, would a bombing build be possible for Kyle that isn't just a shoulder tackle one-shot that we have in the current game, or with the other options there? And the director says, hey, when we find these crazy runaway bugs, they discuss first whether to block it or not. If the ripple effect is so large that it affects other areas, we have no choice but to block it. So he's saying that when that one-shot bug existed in the game, they decided, you know, they thought about whether they should get rid of it or not, and they decided to get rid of it because it was one-shotting the hardest boss in the game at the time. So the reporter says, hey, could we actually get like a bomber version of Kyle? And the director says, Kyle's a character with a high-risk, high-reward charm, but his previous one-shot was a problem because it was low-risk, high-reward. We'll have to see how Kyle improves, but I hope the improvements will bring out that charm. So it sounds like they already know what they're planning to do for Lepic and for Kyle. So we'll just have to see how that comes online, and maybe it has the same impact that we saw with the changes to Jayber in game right now. Reporter moves on to say skins are a must-have in this game. He recently released a bunny girl skin, and my favorite outfit for Valby has fur trimmed on the bunny bodysuit. Who did the skin? I'm also curious about the reaction to the skin. And Lee Byung-jun jumps in here to say, hey, I'm not going to dox my own employees. I'm not going to tell you who concepted and worked on the skin. But the bottom line is that the individual skins need to be differentiated by character design and improved in quality. Future skins will likely follow this direction. While collaboration skins will be shared, we're discussing ways to further differentiate and improve the quality of the theme skins you mentioned. So skins is still a major priority for them, and they're going to continue trying to, you know, impress players with their skin releases every single time. And as we can see, as evidenced by the skin, you know, the revenue of the game jumping up on the top ranks, like the First Descendant goes from like, you know, bottom 80 on highest revenue on Steam, and then when a new patch releases with skins in it, it jumps up to top 10 every single time. So obviously people with disposable income buy a lot of skins, and TFD is kind of their primary money maker. Then, as it should come to no surprise to any person watching this right now, the director says, when it comes to skin reactions, swimsuits are in the top 3. In fact, the first place, second place, and third place for all most popular skins are all swimsuits. So they're incredibly popular. And just to ensure we go further down this pathway that we're on right now, the reporter says, I think you did a great job with the collab skin. The reason for its selection is a bit obvious, but when it comes to butts, it's Nier. It must have been difficult considering an international project. How did you go about doing it? Then Lee responds, Nier is a perfect fit, and then he laughs. Nier was my top choice since Nier is a game that features a lot of collaborations, even though it's an intentional title. The collaboration was easy to carry out. They had a good understanding of the live game process. There was no major issues. I would imagine that the IP holders for Nier Automata have a very good understanding on how to do collaborations, considering they are probably the most common, you know, cross-game collaboration in the entire world for gaming. They show up everywhere. They're very free and loose with their collaboration IP rights. Then Lee goes on to say, you know, the report asks like, hey, what's the next collab? Because they mentioned that there will be another collab coming in Q4 of this year. So what is the next collab? Like, what's the collab? And Lee says it's a relatively well-known IP, but it might be a bit maniacal. For reference, this is the IP that he originally chose. So he didn't choose Nier, he had chosen a different IP to bring online. And in this case, this is the one that he wanted, but it's a bit maniacal. There's been a lot of theories about what this could possibly be. You know, since we're probably in the category, I think Nike is probably like Nike / Stellar Blade is a good option, just because it's another Korean developer, a developer that has done a lot of collabs. There's a lot of Nike collabs in other games as well. So I think, you know, getting Shift Up as part of this would probably be a very natural selection for them. And also considering the fact that they're Korean, they're in the same country, they speak the same language, would probably go a long way for them to do this. So that, you know, that would probably be the most reasonable choice here. But Nikkei, whatever. It's a relatively known IP, but a bit maniacal. So comment down below what you think the collab's going to be. Next, they ask about the skin contest. So like, which is wrapping up very soon, and then we'll see the results of that. But Lee says, we didn't receive many skin requests in the first week, which is kind of sad. So they put the skin contest up and no one applied for it, but obviously people were probably you know, finding time and making concepts and stuff like right away. It's a relatively new game after all. Still, as we showed you during our first anniversary broadcast, we saw a lot of beautiful designs. Some overlapped with concepts we were planning. There were so many that stood out, but it's hard to single out just one. There were also cosmetic reminiscence of heroic characters. Naturally, the female descendant designs were popular. We were also fortunate to receive designs for the sidekicks. Oh no. Hopefully this is just a Google Translate thing. But he's saying they got a bunch of female designs for skins, and they got a bunch of designs for the sidekicks as well. So, oh, God. Oh, my heart. If the results are good this time, we might be able to do this on a regular basis. Of course, it's not a set plan. Then the reporter asks about the lounge, which is coming soon. And Jun Min-suk says, in September, we'll be introducing a concept space showcasing collectibles. So this is in the lounge. They've mentioned you will have a place where you can actually put down your collectibles and show off your collectibles that you've earned through various means. Probably will based on the award system or the medal system or, you know, achievements and things like that, but it will be a way for you to display them in your own lounge. 3 spaces will be open and players will place their descendants in them, displaying figures and collectibles that they get. In December, players will visit other gamer lounges to interact with them and add new spaces. Since we need to introduce lounges alongside the combat content, we split the game into separate sections, core features in September and expanded content in December. So next month, it will be kind of like getting functionality, and then they're going to put more polish and bells and whistles on in December. They showed off a few of these display figures that you can get in game on their first anniversary broadcast about a month and a half ago. But he also mentions here that there's a Valby helmet and Descendant figurine that you can add to your display. There's unpainted figures and you can decorate them by displaying them. And this is purely decorative content, and I'm looking forward to see how gamers utilize it. So there will be several spaces in your lounge where your Descendant will hang out, and you know, there probably will be some like, you know, parasocial interactions with that Descendant chilling out and hanging out there. And there's going to be a whole bunch of ways where you can decorate your personal space. And then in December, they're going to put up an update where you can visit other people's lounges and hang out there and look at what they've decorated and all their figures and displays and things like that. He even adds that there's a space to hang weapons, so your favorite weapons. For skins, I can place my Descendants and dress them with the skins I want in the lounge. It's a space where I can express my thoughts about how I want to decorate the lounge. So, you know, display cases for trophies and figures and display items. And then there's also a place to hang weapons and potentially even mess around with the skins and cosmetics, which maybe the lounge actually might take a place for the customized screen in a sense, or maybe they both have the same functionality built into it. But I think that's actually a new detail that they hadn't shared before. And he even says that it's a place where Descendants gather, and that's where you place them as well. So potentially we might even have multiple, or maybe you can rotate through them very easily, but it's they say it's a place where Descendants gather and you display your own personal items. Even saying that it's content where you can put on the skin you want on the Descendant, and when you approach the Descendant, you can talk to or interact with the Descendant. So now we've got displays, we've got weapons hung up on the wall, we've got skins, and then if you walk over and approach the Descendant, they will talk to you directly. So I'm like dying over here, dude. Then the reporter says, what about the bed? To which the director responds, the bed has motion, and then he laughed. So take that for what you will. It's a space where you can walk up to the Descendant, they will look at you, acknowledge your existence, and talk to you, and the bed has motion. Haha. That asks a great question since Ultimate Luna is coming soon, and we have Ultimate Eugen at the end of the year as well. They say, let's move on to Ultimate Luna. Ultimate Luna is great in terms of performance, but I think the controls could use some improvement. With the keyboard, pressing WASD and skill keys together makes movement difficult, and with the gamepad, it's nearly impossible to change perspective while using skills with Luna. So what are your development goals for Ultimate Luna? Twitch Ju responds, we're considering 2 directions for the Transcendent module. So usually when Descendants come with baseline, if they're not new, they have 4 normal modules. Usually, I mean, we've had a range of historic responses, like when new Descendants come out, like Haley and stuff, sometimes they come out with no red modules all, but they've been kind of working on that so that when new Descendants come out, they have at least 2 red modules, but then they can get 2 more at a future patch, and then there's 2 ultimate specific red modules that come along. So now that we have Luna getting an ultimate version, she then is slated for 2 new Transcendent modules. So for this one specifically, they ask, he's saying, with this, we're considering 2 directions for the Transcendent modules for Ultimate Luna. Luna's problem is that she can't fire while using her skills. So this is a big part of Luna, separate from her gameplay, is that when she brings out her weapon or she's riding on her her little glider, she can't use a weapon, which means weapon cores are irrelevant, weapon bonuses are irrelevant. She can't shoot anything, and she has to have that unique weapon out at all times in order to use the rest of her kit. So that's like kind of one of her major problems. So he's saying we have a module that solves that problem. The other module transforms Luna's signature rhythm game into a different rhythm action game, which should be cool. I mean, maybe the new action game is good. They also need new soundtracks for that as well. The original Ultimate module is still an extension of the original, but Luna's mechanics are different, so it feels like creating a different Descendant. So we're hoping for a version of Luna that addresses the existing difficulties. On a smaller note, Luna fans might enjoy the new music. So new soundtracks for her minigame, a new version of the minigame with a new red module, and a red module that allows her to use a weapon and have a weapon in hand while this red module is equipped. All of that sounds like very, very good news for Luna fans. Next, the reporter asks about the melee weapons, the swords that are coming. This is a big question here. We're introducing 3 melee weapons. The roadmap shows the blade itself. It's hard to imagine a melee weapon with multiple attacks or weak point attacks, which is very important. How will it work with 3 types? I'm also curious about the reasoning behind releasing them the way that you are. To which the director responds, the sword is a completely new weapon. It has new modules and a completely different foundation. It has basic attacks, special attacks, and defenses, and the special attacks trigger unique effects. So from their anniversary event, they mentioned that it'll have a block. There's also a keybind in game right now for the melee weapons that have a block, and there might be a parry mechanic. And then there's a light attack and a heavy attack, so like a charge attack for these swords there. The swords being introduced for the first time are the blade and the two-handed sword. The blade has a skill that allows you to draw a sword when dashing, and the two-handed sword changes its appearance when you accumulate stacks through basic attacks, and when it's fully charged, it has the ability to deliver a powerful single attack. We're repairing weapons with these unique mechanisms. So it'll have a block, it'll have a light attack, it'll have a heavy attack, and it sounds like the light sword is going to be used for dashing and mobility, and the two-handed sword will have a build-up combo mechanic where you attack, and then you'll build some kind of resource or stacks, and then you spend those to do a single big charge attack, which is probably just a heavy attack. And they ask a little bit about the dash mechanic, and the director mentions that the dash will allow you to fly, so maybe it's like a directional dash that you can use, almost like Inez's dash, where she can aim it a little bit, or she can just get some air from it. So he's saying that like the light sword will allow you to actually move through the air with his special ability. So that might be kind of interesting. And then he says that you know, after a year of content with our focus on showcasing new content, we're contemplating what to do next. We need to reorganize existing content and establish long-term strategic plans. This is a big thing for them. Obviously, they had kind of a runway that they were using from launch until like season 1, season 2, where they had already thought through all these seasons, but then they ran out of those like original ideas, and now they're having to recreate new stuff, and they're also having to look at the existing content and make sure it's viable as well. In that regard, how to utilize the secondary attack and grappling modules is a constant concern. So the fact that you can do your sub attack, or you can use grappling as part of it. No one uses sub attack except for to like ground yourself. It's like the only reason you would do your sub attack in this game is just to make, if you're in the air, to force yourself to the ground. That's really the only reason, unless you're breaking a box with it by punching it. The secondary attack is used to further enhance aerial maneuvers, so we can't simply remove it. We need to prepare for what actions to use in the long term and how to adapt it if necessary. It's like homework. Report asks, you know, of the feedback you've gotten over the last year, what was the most memorable? And Lee says, there's so much going on, it's hard to pick one response. I did a recap a while ago. There's so many. The one that comes to mind the most is meeting gamers at PAX. I was worried not many would show up, but they did. And they asked about toes as well. They responded so well and took pictures with me. And there was even a person who had to leave because the line was so long. But I think meeting gamers is the happiest moment I've had. Whether on TV or in person, the most memorable thing about the year is communicating with the gamers. Aww. Then he goes on to say that the Inez incident actually left a serious scar on the director. He said, if I had to pick one today, it would be Inez. You've given me so much feedback, and it's reflected in the metrics, that I think it'll be difficult to make that kind of decision going forward. I think the most difficult topic in live service is dealing with updates that negate the value gamers have built. So it sounds like they don't really ever intend to do the Inez incident ever again. It sounds like they are emotionally and mentally scarred from the review bombing they got from nerfing Inez, that they genuinely don't want to even make that same decision again unless they're forced to, which probably tells you that they're never going to be nerfing Serena. They're just going to be trying to buff all the content up to match her, just because they're so scarred and have PTSD from the Inez incident. And now this interview has come to a close here. Season 3, they just like, hey, give us some final statements. And Lee says Season 3 will be updated over 5 months, ending in December. We hope you'll enjoy it consistently for those 5 months. While you're enjoying Season 3, we'll be diligently preparing what you'll enjoy in the next year, communicating and providing feedback, and Jew ads. We will do our best to address the biggest balance issues during the Season 3 update and create a gaming environment that players can enjoy for a long time. So there you have it. Interview with the 2 directors for the First Descendant, talking about the future, talking about Ultimate Luna, a new mini game for her, more soundtracks for her, a module allows her to bring her weapon out, some reworks to some of the things, some answers around the swords, some hints about the lounge and about the next collab, and a bunch of other stuff as well. So comment below what you think about these responses here and what your predictions are for some of the things that they hinted at but didn't describe perfectly, and also just what you think about the future of TFT in the comments. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.